Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls on Global South nations to stand united to become each other's strength, highlights New Delhi's commitment to promote trade and inclusive development in the region, pledges contribution of $25 million for Social Impact Fund to accelerate progress in the Global South. United States Deputy Secretary of State Richard Verma calls on External Affairs Minister of India S. Jaishankar in New Delhi. Leaders discuss continuing momentum in bilateral ties and exchange views on regional and global issues. And Gaza ceasefire talks paused until next week. At least 10 people killed in an Israeli strike on Nabatea city in southern Lebanon. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to visit Israel on Sunday. India on Saturday held the third edition of Voice of Global South Summit in virtual format, based on India's philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, meaning the world is one family. The summit envisages bringing together countries of the Global South to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform across a whole range of issues. In his opening remarks, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called on nations of Global South to unite and stand together with one voice.
पिछली सदी में बने ग्लोबल गवर्नेंस और फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस इस सदी की चुनौतियों से लड़ने में असमर्थ रहे हैं। फ्रेंड्स, यह समय की मांग है कि ग्लोबल साउथ के देश एकजुट होकर एक स्वर में एक साथ खड़े रहकर एक दूसरे की ताकत बने।
Prime Minister Modi expressed concern about the current global atmosphere of uncertainty and challenges. He noted that while the world is still grappling with the impact of COVID-19, the situation of conflicts has further complicated Global South nations' development journey.
चारों ओर अनिश्चितता का माहौल है। हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की चुनौतियों का सामना तो कर ही रहे हैं और अब हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, फूड सिक्योरिटी और एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी की चिंताएं भी है। आतंकवाद, अतिवाद और अलगाववाद हमारे समाजों के लिए गंभीर खतरा बने हुए हैं। टेक्नोलॉजी डिवाइड और टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ी नई आर्थिक और सामाजिक चुनौतियां भी सामने आ रही।
Prime Minister Modi further said India has emerged as a first responder in situations of humanitarian crisis. We now take you live to the press conference of the Voice of the Global South Summit. External Affairs Minister of India S. Jaishankar is addressing this conference.
This special briefing is focused on the third summit of the Voice of the Global South. So please focus your questions on this topic. With that, I invite Honorable External Affairs Minister to make his opening remarks. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Randit. Good evening. We've just concluded the third Voice of the Global South Summit. It began with a leaders session in the morning and it's just concluded with a session of the foreign ministers. All in all, 123 countries took part in the summit, including India. At the level of head of state, head of government, there were 21 countries. There were 118 ministers not counting the foreign ministers, and there were 34 foreign ministers. There were also 5 multilateral development banks. If you add it all up together, that's 123 plus 21, 21 plus 118, 139 plus 34, so 173 plus 5. This is the first plurilateral event, big plurilateral event of the government in its third term. It has been part of our 100-day agenda, so we're delighted that we could get that moving. So let me come to the summit itself. As I said, we had an inaugural session, and then there were 10 ministerial sessions, 2 foreign ministers, a health, youth, finance, trade, IT, energy, education, and environment. The main theme of the third Voice of Global South Summit was Empowered Global South for a Sustainable Future. And I want to share with you the timing of the summit was, of course, partly dictated by the fact that we will all be proceeding to New York for the Summit of the Future, where many of the issues which we have discussed here would also be discussed out there. Now, what I would like to do really is to give you a sense of what has happened during the day. I would begin with the Prime Minister's opening remarks. I think it is being released to the public, but if I can sum it up essentially, he recalled that the earlier Voice of the Global South had helped the G20 presidency. It had promoted the membership of the African Union, that it had focused on climate action, on health and food security, on energy. It had also addressed terrorism, separatism, extremism, technology challenges, and the outdated international architecture were the subjects which were discussed earlier. He then spoke about the progress in India and gave examples of Mission Life, of rooftop solar, of UPI, of India Stack, and the point at issue was that in many ways these are experiences that India is sharing with other countries of the Global South. When it came specifically to health, he spoke about the fact that our development assistance today includes hospitals, it includes dialysis projects, that we had done vaccines, that we'd been a first responder, and that other examples which had happened since last year were the Global South Young Diplomats Forum and the Global South Action Center. So these were broadly the thrust of his opening remarks. Now, as I said, thereafter we had the first session of the heads of government, heads of state. 21 of them spoke. Now, a lot of what they said was common, so I don't want to go into it person by person. But I essentially culled out 10 points of importance which were overlapping, which were, I think, broadly reflective of the sentiment of the discussions. And this is at the leaders level. And these 10 points, one, of course, was that the problems which they all raised, which was the core of the discussion, were today food, health, and energy security issues, the challenges faced on resources and accessing resources, the problem of realizing the demographic dividend, concerns about employment, and about economic inequality. So this, in a way, were common problems which many leaders raised. Then there was a very strong focus on their climate concerns. So almost every leader spoke about the extreme weather. Many referred to the emissions challenge, growing pollution. A few of them brought up specifically water issues, biodiversity. And the small island developing states were particularly articulate about their predicament. Flowing from that, again, I would say there was a broad theme on the concerns pertaining to the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of it was about resources, but the scars of the pandemic era, how the pandemic had set back SDG progress, I think was a clear sense of the room. Many leaders spoke about debt burden, about liquidity issues that they faced. Then there was references to the challenges of new technologies, and here they referred to AI, to cyber, how to prepare human resources for this new era. And there was a lot of, I would say, advocacy of intra-South, South-to-South technology transfers, sharing of best practices, references particularly to fintech. Then talk about initiatives like International Solar Alliance, like the Global Biofuels Alliance, even references to IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa. And again, some of them referred to multipolarity, saying that the world is moving towards multipolarity, and this is reflected too should be reflected in the workings of the Global South. Where the UN and global architecture was concerned, I would say there was almost a unanimous view, in fact a unanimous view that there was a need for reform, that this was much delayed. Some countries very specifically referred to who they felt should be permanent members of the United Nations. Then if I were to look at the other issues in terms of regional issues, Gaza, the situation in Gaza came up for mention from many of them. Some of them spoke about also on the role of the civil society, and then there was again talk about sovereignty, strategic autonomy, about interference, and concerns which were expressed in that regard. And overall, I would say at the leaders level, appreciation that India had, in a way, they initiated something very good with the Voice of the Global South. There was a positive evaluation of its past role, and clearly a sentiment that this is, in fact, 2 or 3 of them very specifically said, we hope that you will continue with the Voice of the Global South summits. These were broadly the common points which were made by the leaders. Similarly, I had done an exercise for the 2 sessions of the foreign ministers, because a lot of what they said about the leaders were more like at a vision level, a bigger concept level. Foreign ministers were much more into actually execution of these ideas. Again, climate concerns were very strong, I would say almost like the number 1 theme of a lot of what was said. Then the second, again, which was common with the leaders, was debt distress and the slow credit growth. One point which came through sharply was in the foreign ministers meeting, was on the rules-based order, about sovereignty, equality, mutual respect, partnership of equals, ownership of agenda. And in fact, one foreign minister said that, today's international order is a bit like the animal farm, where all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So that was the analogy given to the state of affairs in the world today. There was also, I think, concern expressed regarding shifting of goalposts, that very often in global discussions, positions are taken, goalposts are shifted, and this is done to preserve the lead of those who are in the lead. Among specific concerns which the ministers raised, I would say bridging the digital divide and technology concerns was one. Many of them spoke about corridors and connectivity, physical connectivity, energy connectivity, maritime connectivity, about supply chains. Few of them referred to cultural preservation concerns, that they were worried that their cultures, they were not just getting physically inundated by climate change, but in many cases also their cultures, they felt were vulnerable to what was happening in the world. There was reference to disaster resilient infrastructure. I think here particularly the small islands and the smaller countries were much more focused on that. And the overall messaging which came out of the foreign ministers was very much inclusive, equitable, representative, international order, and that the global south really has to democratize global governance. It has to be much more active. So that was the sum and substance of mostly what happened at the leaders and the foreign ministers level. In terms of the conclusion, where Prime Minister was concerned, he spoke of the need for a global development compact and said that the experience of India's development journey was something we were willing to share with other countries, that global south must set its priorities, and these priorities should be human-centric, they should be multidimensional, multi-sectoral, that there has to be sensitivity to debt, to sustainability of what countries were trying to do in terms of their progress and achievement. The idea of trade for development, of encouraging capacity building, of technology sharing, of financing of projects in a very responsible way. Also that within the global south, we needed collectively to enhance our trade negotiation skills, that amongst us we could be helpful to each other in that regard. Also that supporting the SDG stimulus leadership group, he spoke about providing more generic medicines, of training for drug regulators, so that the global south itself was much more competent in this area, support for natural farming, and how we need to find mechanisms and exercises where the global north, global south divide is bridged to the extent possible, keeping in mind the interests of the global south. So the exercise, in many ways during the day was, a lot of it was really about preparing ourselves for the summit of the future. What I'd also like very, very quickly to run through, because there were, all in all, there were 10 ministerial proceedings which were going in parallel. I think the finance one was supposed to be about people-centric approaches, how to finance SDGs, addressing debt, liability, long-term financing. The trade one was about global value chains, food security, about MSME support, trade facilitation. The health one was on what we call the One World, One Health concept, how to create a health architecture with the WHO at its core, and how do we deal with universal health coverage challenges, how do we use digital public infrastructure for advancing health, looking at food safety regulations. The IT one was expectedly centered around the digital public infrastructure and what we could within the global south do in that regard. Education was about creating the human resources which would accelerate SDG targets, which would promote women-led development, which would help achieve demographic dividends, also a discussion of future of work. Energy was on sustainable energy solutions, but also on the volatile markets, on new alternative energy, on transition moves, on the biofuel alliance, on equitable access to energy. The environment was largely on mitigation pathways, climate finance action, climate justice, vulnerability mitigation, SIDS concerns. And finally, the youth one was about how we address skill-based education, economic youth leadership, innovation, employment readiness, how do we deal with the employment challenges in the global south. So this was really, in a sense, I would say a very succinct description of what were happening in multiple rooms a lot of them in parallel. I have expectedly focused on the two where I was myself present, which was the one with the Prime Minister and the leadership session and the two foreign ministers session. The rest of it is largely a description of the feedback that I have. So I thought I would share that with you, and if any of you have any questions, clarifications, I'd be very happy to answer. If I've left out anything, is there? Oh yes, we will be issuing a chair summary once we get the complete feedback from all the sessions.
With that, we open the floor. Please do introduce yourself as you ask your question. Can we go here, Manish, please?
Manish Chand, India Rights Network. Mainstreaming interest of the Global South was an enduring achievement of the G20 presidency. Which features of South-centric initiatives are being carried forward by, say, Brazil? What is your hope that these will be carried to fruition by other presidencies? And just a linked-up question, behind the rhetoric of South-South unity and solidarity, some say there is a power play shaping up. What is the sentiment? Do most of the leaders, foreign ministers, see India as a natural leader of the Global South? Thank you.
So good evening, this is Ayushi Agrawal from ANI. Sir, could you expand more on the discussion related to the issue of terrorism and extremism? Was there an unequivocal condemnation in the room in regards to terrorism? Also, you mentioned about the issue of debt burden being discussed between the leaders. So were there concerns raised by countries when it comes to China's role in the issue?
हेलो सर, नीरज फ्रॉम न्यूज 18 इंडिया। सर मेरा सवाल यह है कि बांग्लादेश के चीफ एडवाइजर ने भी आज हिस्सा लिया, वहां नई सरकार बनी है और भारत का पड़ोसी देश भी है, उनके क्या एक्सपेक्टेशन है इस सम्मेलन से, क्योंकि वहां नई सरकार स्थापित हुई है, तो ग्लोबल साउथ सम्मेलन से नई सरकार का क्या एक्सपेक्टेशन है?
Let me start with the first question, Manish, from you. On the G20, I would say, by and large, there's been a fair amount of carryover for this reason. The fundamental nature of G20 has been that it works as a troika. And when it works as a troika, they were already fed into our presidency, and we going out are continuing to be associated with this. So many of the issues, and some of them, for example, if you looked at the MDB reform, it was not something which was limited, it was not something which could be done in a single presidency, because you were looking at reports and then the follow-up on those reports. I would say overall what our presidency in a way did was, which today many people very explicitly recognized, was that we shifted the attention of the G20 itself on the Global South. It wasn't, one of course was the formal admission of the African Union, but if you looked at, the kind of issues which came up in the G20 overall, many of them at Global South issues which hadn't got that kind of attention earlier. That I think is very much kept up with Brazil, so there's a high degree of continuity there. Is there a power play in it? No, I don't think there was there was not, that wasn't the sentiment in the room at all. The real issue was, look, we all have, many of them pretty much said it in these words, saying, look, we all have issues, we speak about our issues, often we feel people don't hear us, the world doesn't hear us. But when we have this ability to see, okay, 100 and something other countries feel similarly, we've had this exchange of notes, we are now going to go into New York, we all feel much stronger as a result. We feel much more confident about it. So I would say it was more like a certain solidarity. Yeah, that word was often used. It was more like a solidarity of countries with similar thoughts and similar interests, rather than a competitive sense. Your question, a number of people did mention, I would say perhaps more on the foreign ministers meeting, on terrorism, extremism. I mean, as I said, PM himself mentioned it in his opening remarks as issues which Global South has a shared concern. Obviously, everybody has their own version of this particular challenge. I would say people are pretty clear about it. I mean, I don't think anybody defended it or caveated it or justified it in any way. On the debt burden, no particular country was mentioned, but the debt burden was clearly mentioned, that yes, we have debt burdens. And part of it was in terms of borrowings, but also there was this concern, look, we are facing a liquidity crunch, this is affecting our trade, today we are under economic pressure. So it was a mix really of the issue, of all of this. And also, that we need more access to more windows of lending. I think that sentiment was there. जो आपका जो सवाल जो था जो बांग्लादेश वाला, देखिए जो बांग्लादेश के चीफ एडवाइज़र ने कहा, वो तो मेरा क्या माने उस पर टिप्पणी करना या मेरा उस पर बोलना उचित नहीं होगा। उनकी सरकार की ओर से जो भी वो कहें वो आना चाहिए। पर मैं इतना ही कहूँगा कि एक तो उन्होंने शुरू किया था कि हमारे इंडिपेंडेंस डे के, क्योंकि वो परसों ही था, तो उन्होंने उसके बारे में वो पहले ग्रीटिंग्स पे शुरू किया था। फिर उन्होंने अपनी ओर से कहा कि दुनिया में चैलेंजेस हैं, माने जियोपॉलिटिक्स की है, क्लाइमेट की है, कोविड की है, और फिर अपनी स्थिति, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग जो थे वो दुनिया के बारे में भी बात कर रहे थे और जो अपने देश में जो हुआ है या उनकी अपनी परिप्रेक्ष्य, राष्ट्र परिप्रेक्ष्य जो उनको बोलना था वो बोल रहे थे। तो उनके यहाँ जो अभी जो घटनाएं हुई हैं उसका उन्होंने अपनी ओर से उसका एक विवरण दिया। So if I can some sort of give you a short English version of that, I was asked saying what did the chief advisor of Bangladesh say. I said it would not be appropriate for me to either comment on his remarks or to to give a fuller description, but I would say he began by greeting the Prime Minister and India on Independence Day, and then in terms of the subject matter, he did refer to geopolitical challenges, to climate change as a very big concern, about the COVID issue still being, and then he spoke about the situation in Bangladesh, because it wasn't only him, I mean many other leaders also spoke about their national circumstances apart from commenting on global issues. And I think what he said on national circumstances is better something which would come out of his own system rather than for me to talk about.
Abhishek.
Hi, this is Abhishek from CNN News 18. My question is, in the midst of these, especially these two geopolitical tension, one is happening in the Middle East and other between Russia and Ukraine. Did that sentiment was also discussed when the foreign ministers were meeting? When the foreign ministers were discussing, and
yeah, sure.
and what was the sense that you could share with us?
Okay, sure.
Huma.
So I'm Huma Siddiqui from the Financial Express. So in context of what the Prime Minister talked about, the better trade negotiations and development priorities, I just want to understand, was in context of energy security, was the issue talked about India getting oil from Venezuela and Iran, because there are sanctions there? And my second question is, there are a lot of trade agreements that are being negotiated with some countries in the region, South American region. Was that also talked about?
friend here.
Good evening, sir. My name is Takashi Ishihara from Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun. My question is, we have seen the 3 Voice of Global Summits so far as of today. So how do you evaluate this virtual framework? And is there any possibility to host a physical summit or meeting in the near future?
Okay, for this round, I'll end with that, then we can move on. Your question, Gaza and Ukraine, I would say quite a few people raised Gaza. Some did, in both the leaders and foreign ministers mentioned Ukraine, but definitely Gaza, the references to Gaza were much more frequent than to Ukraine. And the thrust of it, I think, was really concern at the casualties, civilian casualties, and the sentiment was that, sort of the situation needs to go back to a ceasefire and to a negotiations. I think that would be a fair characterization of a very broad range of sentiments. On your question about India and oil, look, India, I mean, energy security came up, but we did not specifically raise, our energy supplies vis-a-vis any other country. I must also say some countries did bring up sanctions, did mention sanctions, some of them very sharply. So if you ask me, were sanctions mentioned? Yes. Where was energy security, volatile markets discussed? Yes. But nobody actually said country A imports from country B or country C. With no, this kind of discussion was not conducive to that kind of detailing. There was no particular discussion about trade agreements with Latin America. On the issue of Voice of Global South Summit, look, the last 2 summits held last year were very, very useful in preparing for the G20, for the New Delhi G20 summit, because what it did was it enabled us, when we spoke to the G20, to say, we've consulted 100 and something more countries, and this, after consultation, is their sentiment. So when we said we are speaking for many countries, you have to go through that exercise to establish you are indeed speaking for them. I think the current one, obviously in terms of its timing, it is much more directly relatable to the Summit of the Future. But again, I would say there was a widespread sentiment today articulated by countries saying, look, this is very useful. Somebody in the Global South needs to take that initiative. And we are very happy that India did it. And so there was everybody was for it, but not everybody maybe has the ability and the systems to pull it all together. So definitely the fact that it happened, was widely appreciated, widely commented upon. Nobody specifically spoke about a physical summit. That, virtual versus physical never really came up in any discussion.
Rishikesh?
Sir, Rishikesh from Press Trust of India, sir. So, has the matter of political interference in domestic affairs by global powers been brought up by the participants, especially leaders or foreign ministers? And is there any expectation from them that PM Modi will raise this particular issue during his visit to US to take part in the Summit of Future?
Next question here.
सर, मैं सपना साधना ग्रुप से सर डेवलपमेंट्स को लेके समिट में बात की गई. अगर हम बात करते हैं, भारत की लगातार अपने आप को मजबूत करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर. सर, आने वाले 5 सालों में आप कहां देखते हैं भारत को?
Jackie, there.
Jackie Martins from BBC. You spoke about the Global South having to play a role in democratizing global institutions, and particularly around UN reform. Is there, I mean, this has been discussed for a while, but I think the current international crises means there's an increased call for that reform. Is there a proposal that's being taken forward to the UN of what that reform could look like?
Okay. So I go to the first question. मुझे याद नहीं आपने हिंदी में पूछा इंग्लिश में पूछा हाँ इंग्लिश में पूछा ना okay. So was the issue of political interference raised? Yes. I think at the leaders level definitely I can remember 1-2 people at least bringing it up at the foreign ministers level as well. So I think for many countries of the global south this is a concern. Now, the idea here was really more to hear each other out, draw from each other. What all PM would say when an opportunity provides itself. I think that is right now not something which we would comment on. So we will see closer to the time as and when his future engagements are concerned. जो आपका सवाल जो था कि अगले 5 साल में भारत अपने आप को कैसे देखता है, देखिए हमें तो लगता है कि हम जानते ही हैं कि हमें पूरी अपेक्षा है कि इस दशक में हम जरूर तीसरी नंबर में होंगे. अभी दुनिया में 5वें नंबर में हैं इकोनॉमिक आर्थिक क्षमता के अनुसार. और हमें ये भी लगता है कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो भारत अभी कर रहा है, जैसे अभी हम डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर देखते हैं, इंडिया स्टैक की बात करते हैं, यूपीआई की बात करते हैं, या अगर आप हमारी जो व्यापार के क्षेत्र में अगर आप भारत का प्रभाव देखें, अगर आप आंकड़े भी देखें, तो हमारी ट्रेड बढ़ेगी, हमारी इकोनॉमी और बढ़ेगी, हमारा दुनिया में इन्फ्लुएंस बढ़ेगा, हमारी राजनीतिक परिप्रेक्ष्य भी आप कह सकते हैं. अब उनका सवाल था बाद में यूएन की बात करेंगे हम. तो मैं तो ज़रूर कहूँगा कि हमें पूरा विश्वास है कि ये आने वाले दशक में जो प्रगति पिछले 10 साल में हुई है ये बढ़ता जाएगा, ये कहीं कम तो नहीं होगा. और बहुत सारे क्षेत्रों में लीप फ्रॉगिंग की संभावना है कि भारत जो है, क्योंकि टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम, जैसे अभी एआई की लोग बात करते हैं, तो एआई में बहुत अवसर है कि इसमें अब मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में बढ़ना थोड़ा और कठिन है. एआई में हो सकता है कि भारत जो है और जल्द प्रगति कर सकता है. तो ये विश्वास जो है, ये आत्मविश्वास भारत में आज जरूर है. और हमें लगता है, और मैं ये भी कहूँगा कि जो ग्लोबल साउथ के देश जो हैं, उनकी अपेक्षा है भारत के बारे में. उनको लगता है कि ये आज एक देश है जो हम दुनिया में करीब 80 देशों में आजकल हम प्रोजेक्ट करते हैं. उनको लगता है कि दुनिया में और खासकर अगल बगल में कुछ हो जाए तो भारत जो है एक फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्डर के रूप में मदद करने के लिए जल्दी आ जाता है. तो भारत से जो अपेक्षा जो है वो बढ़ रही है दुनिया में, तो वो भी है. हमारी क्षमता जरूर बढ़ेगी, पर क्षमता के साथ जिम्मेदारी भी बढ़ेगी, अपेक्षा भी बढ़ेगी. So I was essentially saying that we see ourselves in the next decade, because that was broadly the question, as a country with greater capabilities, with greater responsibilities, with greater expectations from the global south. And that was voiced today, that in many cases people specifically referred to experiences that they'd had with India, or it could be a like a natural disaster, or it could be a health collaboration or a development project. So a lot of those examples were cited. So we can see that the global south does expect much more from India in the coming days. So your question on the UN reform, is there growing sentiment for UN reform? To me, absolutely. Is there a specific idea how to do it? I think there are many specific ideas. Different groups of countries have their own ideas. So the idea, the the exercise is to find a way of reconciling that to the best possible and then subjecting it to a democratic choice. Now, we are not going to get perfect unity among 190 odd countries in the world saying this is how we're going to go about it. Nor do we expect it. So our view is, look, open it up, let everybody put forward their idea, and then give the membership of the UN the ability to make that choice. So we believe today that there should be a negotiation, there should be a text-based negotiation, that whatever emerges from it, we are not saying it's necessarily something that has to agree with us. But if really we believe in a democratic world order, then we think this 190 odd members should be allowed to vote about the future of the UN like many of us vote about our respective futures. And we feel that process has been unduly and unfairly blocked. So our striving is in that direction. We know that it is not without its challenges, but we continue to persevere.
John?
Thanks for the briefing, John Reed from the FT. I gather China did not take part in this summit and in past summits. Did India invite them? And if not, why not? Or could we get some comment on China's non-participation in the summit? Thank you.
Chandrakala?
Good evening, sir. This is Chandrakala from ETV Bharat. My question is quickly on Bangladesh. With the new interim government in place, how do you see the India-Bangladesh relations going further? Thank you.
Suhasini?
Dr. Jaishankar, this is Suhasini Heather from The Hindu. I had two questions just picking up on that UN reform. You'd spoken about the need specifically for UNSC expansion, and Prime Minister in his opening remarks has said there should be something concrete that you take to the summit of the future. So I just wanted to specifically ask if there will be some document that goes, this compact, will there be a document that's going to be part of the summit of the future that goes from this? Since John asked about China, was Pakistan invited, and was there a response?
I think I'll take one or two more so that I can
Smita
cover as many people as...
Hi, Smita Sharma. I'm just trying to figure out what do you see as the future of this summit moving forward? I mean, I understand you're exchanging ideas, but are you also looking at solutions in some sort of a way when you talk about the debt issues of the member countries? Is there an alternative mechanism that is being talked about? IPEF was announced in Quad, Indo-Pacific, didn't move around really. And B, was there any health collaboration proposals on Mpox outbreak currently, on the current situation there?
There.
Good evening, sir. Dhairya Maheshwari from Sputnik India. Sir, over here. So my question is in regards to, could you just sum up the concrete deliverables, particularly the financial ones that came out of this whole summit?
Sorry, I didn't.
So would it be... So concrete deliverables in terms of financial ones.
Okay. So the first question, was China there? Answer is no. So underlying question, were they invited? Answer is no. Second question, India, Bangladesh. I think the only relevant part I have already spoken about, which were the sentiments expressed by the chief advisor in respect to the overall summit. But India-Bangladesh relations, I think that gentleman will answer at his press conference, which is what he does for a living. For the summit of the future, is there a document from this exercise? Is there a document which goes there? No. There is a separate exercise of the Summit of the Future document which is going on. This exercise was much more, in a way, finding common positions and and the idea was to create that sense of coming together on a compact. So I would say, I mean, clearly in many ways, ideationally, there would be a carryover, but I think that exercise and this exercise are they are separate in a way. On the monkeypox issue, no, there was no specific reference to anybody. I mean, there were references to health challenges which were not, you're not getting the priority kind of thing, but not specific in that sense. We weren't looking so much at financial. I mean, this was not a visit where you do saying, okay, I have a list of deliverables to put before the world. This was more like a gathering of people around a set of themes who are exchanging ideas, taking, mulling that between them, taking it forward, exactly as we did last year. Now, eventually, as you saw last year, all of that in some form or the other impacted the G20. So we would certainly hope, that because there are, I mean, it isn't just that we have New York and the UN. There are other conferences, there are biodiversity conferences, there are COPs. In fact, the next COP also came up for some discussion. So I think many people sort of brought in ideas, bounced it off each other, partly reacted to something which somebody else said. And the idea was, okay, when we do our gathering, we will take that from here and feed it into that. I think that would be a fair play. Sorry? No.
With that, we come to the close of this session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Honorable External Affairs Minister to be with us this evening for this special session. And I would also like to thank all of you for participating in today's special briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar interacting with the media and briefing them on the key takeaways of the Voice of Global South Summit that India hosted today. In his the points that he mentioned, External Affairs Minister highlighted some of the key interventions of the participants. There were 123 countries that participated in this summit. The focus was on food, health and energy security. There were a host of areas that the minister highlighted. Climate concerns were some common areas of convergence for the countries. Also, need for reform in the global architecture. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who represented India in this summit, spoke about the manner in which India has made important interventions for the empowerment of the countries of the global south. He also called for unity of these countries. Those were some of the key highlights. Let's also turn to the interventions that Prime Minister made in this summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that India has emerged as the first responder in situations of humanitarian crisis in the world.
मानवीय संकट के समय भारत एक फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्डर की तरह अपने मित्र देशों की सहायता कर रहा है। चाहे पापुआ न्यू गिनी में ज्वालामुखी फटने की घटना हो या कीनिया में बाढ़ की घटना, हमने गाजा और यूक्रेन जैसे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट क्षेत्रों में भी मानवीय सहायता प्रदान की है।
And Prime Minister said that India has established a social impact fund to accelerate progress in digital public infrastructure for the Global South with an initial contribution of $25 million.
ग्लोबल साउथ में डीपीआई में तेजी लाने के लिए हमने सोशल इम्पैक्ट फंड बनाया है। भारत इसमें $25 मिलियन का शुरुआती योगदान करेगा। फ्रेंड, हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी के लिए हमारा मिशन है वन वर्ल्ड वन हेल्थ। और हमारा विजन है आरोग्य मैत्री, यानी फ्रेंडशिप फॉर हेल्थ।
In his closing remarks, Prime Minister Modi proposed a comprehensive global development compact that will assist partner countries in the global south in achieving balanced and inclusive growth using India's experience in development journey. India will start a $2.5 million special fund to assist in trade promotion activities. It will also provide $1 million fund for capacity building and trade promotion.
आज मैं आपके सामने भारत की ओर से एक व्यापक ग्लोबल डेवलपमेंट कॉम्पैक्ट का प्रस्ताव रखना चाहता हूं। इस कॉम्पैक्ट की नींव भारत की विकास यात्रा और विकास साझेदारी के अनुभवों पर आधारित होगी। यह कॉम्पैक्ट ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों द्वारा स्वयं निर्धारित की गई विकास प्राथमिकताओं से प्रेरित होगा। यह ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक होगा और विकास के लिए मल्टी डायमेंशनल होगा और मल्टी सेक्टोरल अप्रोच को आगे बढ़ाएगा। यह डेवलपमेंट फाइनेंस के नाम पर जरूरतमंद देशों को कर्ज तले नहीं दबाएगा।
Prime Minister Modi highlighted that India will work towards the development of global south nations together.
ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में फाइनेंशियल स्ट्रेस और डेवलपमेंट फंडिंग के लिए भारत एसडीजी स्टिमुलस लीडर्स ग्रुप में सहयोग दे रहा है। हम ग्लोबल साउथ को सस्ती और प्रभावी जेनरिक दवाइयां उपलब्ध कराने के लिए काम करेंगे। हम औषधि रेगुलेटर्स के प्रशिक्षण में भी सहयोग करेंगे। कृषि क्षेत्र में नेचुरल फार्मिंग के अपने अनुभव और टेक्नोलॉजी साझा करने में हमें खुशी होगी।
At the Foreign Ministers session of Third Voice of Global South Summit, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said the theme of the session, charting a unique paradigm for Global South.
This gathering takes place as the world grapples with multiple conflicts, tensions, and stresses. We, the nations of the Global South, are particularly impacted. The purpose of this exchange of views is to define our interests through that process. Hence the theme of this session, charting a unique paradigm for the Global South. We must work together as a family towards facilitating the flow of low-cost financing and critical technologies to the Global South.
India's Health Minister J.P. Nadda also addressed the Voice of Global South Summit. He said that India launched the Ayushman Bharat scheme to provide comprehensive, people-centric, need-based healthcare service.
Under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, India launched the flagship program Ayushman Bharat, meaning thereby Long Live India, to provide comprehensive, people-centric, need-based healthcare services through 4 pillars, which is a testament of our commitment to universal health coverage. India is implementing the National Action Plan on AMR, and we believe that there is an opportunity for us to learn from each other's experiences through exchange of ideas in this sector.
That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. You can also download our DD India mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. And thank you very much for joining us in this edition of DD India Live. We'll take your leave for the entire team in New Delhi. Thank you very much for watching us. Namaskar.